Good morning, guys. I have to say it's really exciting to be here, to be talking about a subject as interesting as climate, and to be able to intertwine that with autism. Really, really exciting. And what we're going to do is we're going to talk to you today about how the climate within the world of autism has changed, how it's continuing to change and evolve, and we're also going to put a little bit of our own sort of personal experiences involved within that as well. So hopefully you guys will find it interesting.
When we looked at the theme climate, and especially to do with autism, then what I'm also always surprised at is the fact of how much change there has been over the past years. We know so little about autism, but it's easy to forget that, and it's easy to think that we actually know an awful lot. But it's still a very, very new field and an exciting field. So I was quite amazed. Again, it reminded me of how much change there has been, but also how little change there has been. And that's part of the reason why we do what we do.
Okay, this is quite a poignant photo, really, certainly for both of us. Just under a year ago, me and Monique, we both spoke at an event in Swansea, an autism event, and little did I know that this was, my life would never be the same again, and neither would yours. No, Monique, absolutely, we just kind of really bounced off each other. We really enjoyed talking together, sort of like that vibe that we got from one another. And it's certainly a day that I will always look back with real fondness, and sort of the starting point, I think, is something quite special.
The photo, we chose this photo. We were looking for photos of the two of us speaking, but we actually, when we found this one, yeah, it was quite beautiful at showing how we were connected. It's a very literal photo, and it's a little bit of a joke and a fun sort of autism joke that I know a lot of my friends with autism would laugh at as well. Literal. We're not literal at all. No, we just choose literal photos. This was the beginning of In Awe. And we didn't know that at the time. I didn't know that at the time. But I remember meeting John, and I remember thinking, I have to work together with him. Now, I didn't think company, because at the moment I live in Holland. So Holland and Wales connecting, slightly difficult. But I remember thinking we have to do some projects together. So that was very much stuck in my mind. And when I get an idea, then it sticks. And this was an idea that stuck like super glue in my mind. And I saw Twitter come past. And it was an application for Vale, Inspire the Vale bursaries. And then I thought, oh, it's for people working in Wales and working in the Vale. I was like, wow, that's really cool. Oh, it's a bursary for a startup. That's really cool. And then I thought, wait a minute. Jonathan and me, we could start a company up together, even though I already run a company in Holland. So that was the start. It's not really the normal start of how you think, yes, let's go into business together. And yeah, we only know each other for less than a year.
Less than a year, yeah.
And we haven't killed each other yet, so it's going quite
well.
There's
still time. Okay, fantastic. So I'm going to tell you just a little bit about myself and my experiences a little. It's crazy to think that I'm 30 years old now. It seems like just the other day that I was buying my first lottery ticket. I was diagnosed at 21 years old, so I went through childhood really without knowing or understanding, you know, why I would think differently, feel differently, approach situations differently. And I think for a child, that's very important to know why things are happening and why things are going on, and you know, why you're not quite connecting with your peer group in the same way as everybody else. And I think this is something that a lot of people who aren't supported properly on the spectrum feel, and that is an overwhelming sense of failure, because the support systems and the support networks aren't there to allow these incredible young people to achieve, to feel like they can have goals and ambitions. And for me, that's so key. It's about changing a cycle of failure and making it into a cycle of success, giving somebody the positivity and the confidence to feel like, yes, I can do this, I can achieve my dreams. For me, that's so important. Again, rejection, another huge thing people on the spectrum feel. Because if you can't, you struggle to connect with your peers, you struggle to talk about the things that are relevant and in at that time. And you know, if you're, for example, more interested in talking about something like statistics or Minecraft's quite a big one as well. That kind of, I certainly find that with people that can have a shelf life, and then people get bored and they want to go and talk about something that might stimulate them a bit more. So you kind of always feel, as certainly I always felt, I was sort of pushed to one side and not always really accepted. But I think, you know, the really cool thing about being diagnosed is that I think certainly it gave me, and I think it gave any person, the platform to understand the whys, the hows, and give a general understanding as to learn how you work as a person. And I think that's something a lot of people can take for granted, but just to know and understand, okay, I think that because, I understand that because. That word because, it makes such a big difference. Because without that word, it's just a dead sentence and you've got nothing to go on.
I was diagnosed when I was 24 years old. So we're both examples of getting a diagnosis later in life, and I'm now 31. My experience was a slightly different one. And that was also one of the reasons why I wanted to work together with John. I was lucky enough to grow up at an international college, United World College of the Atlantic. I grew up, you see a picture of a castle, St. Donat's Castle. Other children had a plastic castle to play with in their back gardens, and I had a real castle. So, of course, that helped my street cred in school, because I was the girl that lived in a castle. So I thanked my parents constantly for letting me grow up there, because it made me cool when I wasn't. I was the oddball. I remember observing. That was what I did constantly. And I always had friends, because I realized that I saw very quickly by observation that little girls always had a best friend. So every time I went to a new school, it was very clear the goal was get a friend very quickly. But it wasn't the same way of making friends as my best friend. When I talked to her about it later on, 10 years down the line, when I explained how I went about making her my friend, she was like, wow, that's a bit freaky, actually. But for me, it was normal, and I thought everybody did it in that way. I loved being different. I'm the daughter of an artist. That makes a big difference. I think all of the people sitting here today, Creative Mornings says enough. Being creative usually means that you are automatically slightly different from the rest. So I was lucky enough to have that example at home, and my father would tell me, no, be the black sheep of the family. That's good. Don't follow everybody else when they're wearing Nike. Go and do something else. So at home, being different was normal, but when I went out into the wider world, being normal was different. So for me, it was a real journey of acceptance, because when I left that safe environment, then suddenly my house of cards came falling down, and I didn't realize how precarious I had built that. I thought I had a stable basis to stand on, but I didn't. And that started my journey of trying to find out why I thought so differently.
Okay, so a little bit of a history lesson on a Friday morning for you guys. I know you must be thrilled. So yeah, basically, you see the word autos up there. And what that means is sort of inward looking, inward facing, and that's the Greek word. That's something that a lot of people with autism have to contend with, you know, to being introverts. And I think something else that's quite poignant for people on the spectrum, and certainly when I look back, you look, you know, right back in like 1915 and all those years ago, people on the spectrum would be, for example, they'd be put in institutions. People would be put in institutions and their parents would be told, forget about them, let nature take its course, just move on with your lives. And if you think that's just 100 years ago, you know, how much things have changed. It seems a little bit crazy to me that ever happened, that there were these people who were ever in that situation. Certainly for myself, when I was growing up, I can understand the autism schizophrenia link quite nicely, because people thought I was actually schizophrenic. And it just shows that certainly I can understand how historically that link has been paired together. And I think as well you'll also see very nicely put in there 1940s Kanner and Asperger's. Well, I'll just sort of touch upon the Kanner's autism. The main thing that certainly I understand with Kanner's is that there is always a language delay, a speech delay. That's the main difference.
When Kanner and Asperger were actually working with children with autism, at the time they hadn't yet given it a name, but it was quite interesting because Kanner and Asperger were working at the same time, but they were working in different countries. And they both came up with the same word to describe the children they were working with, and that was autism. Autism has always existed. So in the time when we would have been labelled as possibly schizophrenic, we would have been put in institutions, we wouldn't be standing here today, which is quite shocking when you think about it. Insanity and a mental handicap, those were also things very easily assigned to autism. And now we've moved on, thankfully. Sometimes in some countries not enough. There are countries where children still get locked away, where they don't have schooling and where they don't have the capacity to develop. So even though we're doing brilliantly in maybe Britain, there are other countries around the world where it's much, much worse. The Asperger, he was working with children that didn't have a language delay, and he also noticed very much that inward-looking gaze, and that links back to what I talked about with observation. I was constantly observing the world around me to try to understand it. With children with autism, more often cognitive functioning develops first, whereas with children without autism, you have more of a chance that the social-emotional element comes first. So cognitively, I was trying to understand desperately the world around me. Now emotionally, at 31 years of age, I probably started that journey only about 5 years ago. So last year, that was the first year when I realized that at some point my parents will pass away. That's fairly strange if you think that I was 30 years old when I realized that. Most children realize that at quite a young age. So I'm going through a process at the moment of realizing that quite big life concept. PDD-NOS, when I got my diagnosis, then the one thing I said to the person who was giving it to me, I said, whatever you do, don't give me PDD-NOS. That's because it's, if you literally say it, it's pervasive development disorder, not otherwise specified. That's great, huh? Somebody says to you, right, autism, but PDD-NOS. So that was stuck in my brain of just don't not otherwise specify me because I need an answer. The women to men ratio, there is a lot of discussion about that. Women on the spectrum, we don't know anything about women with autism yet. We've only just started. If you think 1940, that's when autism first was labelled. We're only 2015 now. So we've got a long way to go for women, and that's also one of my passions in life. Now we've got the DSM-5, that's the way of diagnosing. Wonderful lists. You just get check on the box. I think a lot of people who are extremely creative would probably also get a lot of checks in the boxes. And yeah, now all of those labels of Asperger, classic autism, Canner's autism, PDNOS, they've all gone. And so now it's just autism. There's good things to be said about that, and there's bad things to be said about that. At least now I won't get people saying to me, oh, Asperger's, so you're really good at maths. I'm not really good at maths. I'm really bad at maths. Yeah, that's me. Yeah, I think really that says enough. A baby who was as stiff as a board when I was touched and don't even try to hug me. So my mother had to, and still she was looking at me, so loving. But I was really an evil child at that age. My sister, who was 16 at the time, she remembers thinking, I don't think I want children in the future. And that was because of me. She did have a child, she had my nephew, thank goodness. So yeah, I grew out of that when I started being able to walk. So again, it's a very classic story of when a child becomes independent and they can move themselves and I can decide to be hugged, then suddenly touching me was a very different story.
Right. I don't really know what to say about that photo. I mean, let's be fair, it's a face only a mother could love, really, isn't it? But yeah, I mean, sort of contrasting to Monique a little bit. I was very much a child that really liked contact. I always liked to be held by my parents, normally because, you know, I'd have a rattle in my hand and I could hit him over the head with it. So, you know, that was obviously a big pull. But I think it just kind of shows the difference, doesn't it? Even in children of such a young age, how one can really want contact, desire contact, find comfort from contact, and then you have another child like Monique, even at that age, who just can't cope with it. I think that's rather fascinating. Okay, yes, that is I know what you're all thinking. What happened?
Transformation.
Now, if I ask you guys a question, just think about it in your head, just for a moment. When you look at that photo, what do you see? What do you see? Thank you very much. Check's in the post. Now, for me, I think a lot of people they'd look at that photo and they'd say, oh, I see a boy in front of a camera smiling. That's not what I see. I see a young boy who is making contact, who wants to make contact. I'm engaging with the photographer. I'm looking beyond the camera, into the photographer's eyes. For me, I'm taking on board instruction. I'm listening. I want to be there. I want to have my photo taken. Oh, goodness sake, I'm smiling. Apparently, people with autism struggle to smile. Well, hello, right there. And I think, for me, it just shows that when somebody says a child with autism doesn't want contact, it drives me mad. Because it's about the sort of contact that child wants to give you, or the sort of contact you receive from a parent. It's very, very subjective thing. Very subjective thing.
That's a photograph that my father made, and just as with the photograph with John, I think you can see very, very clearly that is a child who is asking for contact and who is making contact, literally reaching out with her hand. And yeah, it's also one of my pet hates when I hear that children with autism and young adults with autism don't want to make contact. That's not true. It's not true at all. But for people who don't have autism, it can be really, really awkward when you meet a child with autism and they're not making contact with you in the way that you'd expect it. For example, the eye contact thing. That's a really big thing, not making eye contact. Well, it makes perfect sense. If you are delayed in your development of who you are and you're inward looking, then it makes total sense why there's also a delay in the development of eye contact. I had issues with eye contact when I was little. I don't now. And there's many friends of mine who feel the same way. But for when you meet a child with autism or a person with autism who does do things a little bit differently, you feel awkward. And why is that? we've got to remember that making contact is really the foundation upon which humans function. So if you have somebody who is not making contact, it makes perfect sense why you feel uncomfortable from the very tips of your toes and why it feels awkward. So it's okay to feel that way. That's always what we want to pass on as well. It's okay to feel awkward. Once you've accepted that feeling, then you can move past it and you can start trying to make contact in the way that that person is asking for. So don't feel bad if you feel awkward. That's allowed. We feel awkward all the time, and that's okay as well.
Okay, so treatment, that's a very interesting one. Certainly from my point of view, I've experienced in my life many different sort of therapies and treatments that people have tried to use on me. I mean, if I say to you guys, I was medicated with antidepressants at 12. You know, I was, as a young man, I spent 2 years of my life in a mental health institution for adolescents. And I think that's quite stark, because we talk about the changes that have happened since the early 1900s, but yet there are still similarities there and things that need to improve. Essentially, the climate for people in autism, there's still a way to go. There's still a way to evolve it.
With medication, I also noticed very much that at one time I was given antidepressants and they worked in a very different way with me. So that's also an area that we really know nothing about, let alone how medication works for children when they've only been tested on adults. But when you're talking about then the autism brain, we really have no idea how that works. So we're very cautious in that subject. One of the things I've highlighted, training. There's a lot of social skills training that goes on. And that's also one of the things that we question very much. If you think of development of a child, you don't force certain development because that can work in the opposite direction. Yet we see that very often with people with autism. And sometimes they force that development themselves because they think, yeah, but I should be able to do that, right? So then they try and try and try. And then you get people with burnouts. Development and hope. If you look from the perspective that there's a delay in development and an acceleration in development, suddenly that changes the whole autism world. Suddenly it's not a defect anymore, it's not a deficit, but there is something going on which is causing the delay and acceleration. There is always an acceleration, yet we talk so much only about the delay.
Okay. Now I think this is an interesting one, really. Because certainly Monique touched on the training side of things, and I think certainly for myself, I kind of look at it as I don't need to be chasing a bone that's been thrown by a human being. Do you know what I mean? You know, I want to learn and I want to develop in my own way, and I think that's quite nice, and it quite nicely leads on to this statement, because, you know, too many times I hear people within the autism community saying we.
I did that.
Yeah.
We put that in because we were having a conversation over Skype, and then I said, yeah, and we are thinking, and then John went, is there a we? Mm. And I thought, oh God. So this was my bad that I did this.
So I like to correct you.
It's okay. Necessary sometimes, not all the time.
Now, for me, I think a lot of people kind of see autism as something that's quite out of sync with the world, quite out of step. But actually, if you think about it, there are some incredible people on the spectrum who are incredibly creative individuals. You know, for example, I know it's the old cliche, but, you know, you look at Einstein. You know, goodness, if he'd have been scared to be different, you know, there'd have been no theory of relativity. He'd have been down the pub necking a few pints, wouldn't he, really? And I think that's what's so cool. It's about not being afraid to show that you're different, not being afraid to show that you have different skills, that you have something different to offer, not being afraid to have people sort of think you're strange, you're different. Well, who's strange and who's different? Do you know what I mean? That's very much, I think, quite subjective.
Growing up as a daughter of an artist, one of the things that I realised very quickly is that my father also, he never walked in step with the world. And that also wasn't his choice. It was just how he was, and he loved it. And that's something he passed on to me, and that's what I think the creative community can do to help the whole idea of autism, is it's cool to be different within the creative community. It's not cool to be average. So how can we pass that along to the autism community and help them also to realize it's cool to be different, and it's okay if some things take a little bit longer, and it's not a big deal. So it made me realize autism and creativity, actually, we're pretty in sync with each other, which I thought was pretty cool.
I thought it was cool as well. Okay. And so I think the best ways to kind of allow somebody to express these things, you know, to allow that difference, is by showing them respect, that basic human respect of just somebody's got a different opinion, a different viewpoint, you know, a different idea. Let's respect that. Let's not sort of put it down. I think you've got to encourage, you've got to be positive, you've got to make somebody feel like it's right to think differently, like it's a positive thing to have an idea that's outside the box. Brilliant. That's how we progress as a human race. And I think also, if you are positive and you are encouraging, the self-worth that a person gains, they start thinking, oh, hello, well, I am quite good at this, I do have good ideas, and it grows from there.
One of the things we don't do often enough is listening. You guys are listening very well right now, so well done. But it's actually quite a hard thing to do nowadays because the world moves so quickly. But for people with autism, being listened to and being heard is really, really essential. Asking questions. Often we go with the cliches of autism. Rain Man. Yeah, no, I'm not a savant. I can't memorize things like Kim Peake did. So we try to encourage people also who listen to what we're saying is ask questions and don't make assumptions. Communication is based on assumptions. That's why it goes so wrong sometimes, like two ships in the night passing each other. So by asking questions, you also make it, again, cool for a person who's different and maybe does have autism. You make it interesting. You're interested in them. And being open-minded, but I think with a creative community, I think you've got to step up already, because being open-minded, I think maybe that's essential to have if you work in the creative industry. And thinking out of the box. And again, that's for me, I was taught that by my father, thinking out of the box was normal and fun.
Okay, for me, this is something I'm very, very passionate about, and I think it's really important that people understand this is about seeing the person. Seeing the person, not seeing the autism. Goodness, when somebody sort of refers to me as an autistic person, it does my head in. Because I'm always a person first. I'm a person with autism, and that little difference for me is quite significant.
The stereotyping, it's really easy to stereotype each other. Again, we do that every day. And sometimes it's just in a joking form, but often you can catch yourself stereotyping somebody and then you feel bad about it. As people with autism, we are often stereotyped. That goes hand in hand with being open about the fact that we do have that extra little diagnosis next to us. Acknowledging stigmas. And yeah, this was my little joke. I really had a fun time last night when I put that in. And then exterminate them. For people who obviously are not sitting here, the Doctor Who experience is over there. So that's, yeah. Enjoy being different. Celebrate the differences and make it, again, cool. And that's what we're constantly asking ourselves. How can we make it cool for youngsters when they come up to us and they say, yeah, this is the first time that I haven't felt alone. And they're 15 years old. And that's what really drives us. If we can make one person not feel alone, then we've done our job.
Okay, that statement at the top, once you've met a person with autism, you've met one person with autism. And for me, it's kind of signified by this example, really. We had a good laugh about this yesterday. And we're in the process of starting a business together, and you have these little moments of significance, don't you, where, oh my goodness, we've done this, we've done that, we're a step closer to starting, really exciting. And, you know, I was there and I got the insurance forms through yesterday, and I was like, yes, get in, you know, it's real, it's happening, we're here, we've got the insurance. Probably the most overstated reaction to an insurance form in the history of man. But what was your reaction, Mon?
Oh, brilliant. I was very confused at how enthusiastic he was. Because yes, it's very important to have insurance. It's absolutely, I agree. But John was nearly bouncing on the sofa. Yes, we've done it. And then I remembered that when I was in Holland, then we got the branding through. I was not bouncing, I was nearly jumping on the sofa, because finally the branding came through. We had an image. And John went?
Yeah, great, next.
So that was a good moment for the two of us, again, to remember, once you've met one person in life, you've met one person in life. So yeah, insurance does it for you. Weirdly. And images does it for me.
You guys feel very normal now, don't you, after that? Yeah, absolutely. What are we going to do to help change the climate? Well, this is for us where our passion comes from. You know, we want to work together. We want to stimulate each other, push each other forward. And what we want to do is we want to show people, that anybody, regardless of who they are, that they can achieve their goals. You know, for me personally, I've spent the last decade of my life feeling like I can't do anything, like I'm not good enough. And this is one of the really cool things about having met Monique, because, you know, she showed me, well, actually, John, yes, you can. And when you have somebody next to you who shows that belief in you, that's pretty amazing and inspiring. And that's what we want to kind of give back to other people. We want to be that person who says, do you know what, we believe in you, you can do this, go out there and get it.
We also realise how long it takes for the knowledge, the newest knowledge, to trickle down to the people who actually need it the most. And so we try to bring together what's happening in the science world, and we try to translate that into a way that's understandable also for maybe young kids with autism. The asking questions, we've done our job if you walk away from here not thinking, oh, I now have an idea about autism. If you walk away thinking, I really don't know anything about autism, then we've done our job. So we're not here to give answers, we're here to make you ask questions.
Okay. Now the thing is, you know, when you sort of grow up having an autistic spectrum condition, something that can happen is you are in danger of being stereotyped by your families from your behaviour, from the way you react, the way you respond, the way you think, the way you feel. But me and Monique, we never had that. And the thing that I think shows our strength as individuals and as a twosome really is that we really have fought and strived to be the people we are today. And I think the most important point is that the two people we are two people we're actually quite proud of.
And if you take away anything from our presentation today, apart from ask questions, and we know nothing, it's a good thing because we know nothing, we would like you to remember these children, and they wanted to belong, and they wanted to be a part of society, and they were accepted by the people around them. And basically, who are standing here today as adults, asking to be understood. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you.